Canada's food banks are on the brink of collapse as poverty absolutely explodes in this country. How on earth has a first world country got to this point? So firstly, let's take a look at this video that comes from CTV of all places that shows what is going on.
Some new numbers on poverty in Canada come with a stark warning. If more isn't done, the food bank system nationwide could collapse. For some, a local food bank is a critical part of their safety net. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
I mean, just think about that, guys. Just look at what is going on there, that lineup. I mean, you've just got to think. This is like something seen in the Great Depression or a third world country. I mean, it is just unbelievable.
Just part of the line outside a Toronto food bank today, where thousands of clients will shop this week, a number that keeps going up.
As a single mother of 4 kids, it's not easy for me.
According to Food Banks Canada, 1 in 4 Canadians are experiencing food insecurity, while nearly half of those surveyed feel they are doing worse financially than they were a year ago. These are statistics Lee Soda.
And why are they doing worse financially than they were a year ago? It's because of inflation. That's what happens. If your wages aren't going up at the rate or higher than inflation, then you're actually falling further and further behind. And a lot of these people, I just want to say, are working, but they're working these minimum wage jobs. They're doing things like Uber and skip the dishes, and you just cannot afford to make a living off that. You're in this type of wage slavery loop, and these people are almost like the modern day slaves. It's unbelievable.
There are people who are working, fully employed, and having to access the food bank. We have seniors, we have newcomers, we have students.
Today, Food Banks Canada released its annual poverty report card, a look at the challenges facing Canadians and how well governments are responding to them.
We're not doing enough as a country to make sure people are able to make ends meet right now.
Most provincial governments received grades in the D range, while 7 out of 10 got a D- for what the report called an insufficient approach to poverty reduction. A lack of affordable housing and stubbornly high food prices have created a perfect storm of...
Yeah, and why do we have such high food prices in Canada? It's because there's no competition in Canada when it comes to grocery store chains in Canada. We just have this oligarchy. And time again, the government comes out and they say, yeah, you know what? We're going to do something different this time. We're going to do this and that, when they're actually giving money to the grocery store chains. I mean, the amount of money that the grocery store chains receive off the federal government is unbelievable. And that's literally our tax dollars that are going to maintaining these oligarchies. And then they come out with these boards and committees and say, yeah, we're going to look at trying to encourage people to come to Canada. But the grocery store chains and the oligarchies in Canada have positioned themselves in such a way it's almost impossible to compete, and that's why there's no competition coming in. They don't just own the retail stores, they own the logistics, they own where the food is coming in. I mean, they just have complete control over everything. And then the red tape and regulation that we have in Canada when it comes to like having French stuff on the label, for example, is just completely ridiculous when you look at the amount of people who speak French in provinces in Western Canada, for example, and French is their primary language. I mean, yeah, it's just unbelievable.
Need in many parts of the country, and there are concerns the system simply can't keep up.
They cannot continue to meet the growing demands with the amount of food and donations that are coming through the doors. And even then, no system is designed for, growth that like we've seen.
The report includes a number of policy recommendations, among them rent control and increasing social assistance. Building more houses is also needed, something the provinces and the federal government have promised, but which will take years.
The report also found more young people are turning to food banks. Between February and April of this year, a quarter of those aged 18 to 24 went to a charity because they didn't have enough money. to buy.
And it's also important to note that when it comes to food banks, you've got now, unfortunately, some people that are exploiting food banks, especially when it comes to international students. We've all seen the videos on TikTok and Twitter of people exploiting food banks. And I guess that's what's happening when you have this such wide use of food banks, which is becoming well known by people and almost relied on by people who shouldn't be going as well. I do believe that they need to, unfortunately, do some type of income check or verification on people before they're able to access the food bank in order to prioritize the people who really need it versus people who are just going there because they don't want to cut back on their expensive lifestyle, because we're definitely seeing that happen too. When you look at the type of cars that are pulling in to some of these food banks, it's like, okay, well, what kind of lifestyle are you living? And obviously just looking at a car is very anecdotal, but there should certainly be some sort of checks in place now, especially with the skyrocketing use of these food banks as well. And another thing, guys, is when the federal government comes in and they say, you know what, we're going to buy and help these food banks more, where do you think they go? They go to Loblaws, they go to Sobeys, and they purchase that food. And if the federal government that produces nothing is coming in and buying that food, then where does the cost increase go? Because the federal government didn't create any food, and now they're competing with you in order to buy it to get to the food bank. So you get to this ridiculous point where actually that puts even more pressure on food prices going up. And this is exactly what happens with government intervention. I mean, the mainstream media and these news articles, they're always like, oh, the governments need to do more, the governments need to do more. And they do, but it's not just a case of them subsidizing everything, because that doesn't help the problem, it generally adds to it. They need to go back to the root cause. Why are food prices so high? Why is competition not coming to Canada? And the reality is the power structures and oligarchies in Canada, they don't want to be challenged, and they won't be changed. They're not likely to be changed under a Liberal government, an NDP government, or a Conservative government. So anyway, the cost of living crisis. Canada's poverty rate is on the rise. So this is on the deep dive. I'll link this article in the description. Canada's poverty rates have been on the rise, according to the latest figures from Statistics Canada. As of January 2024, the NBM predicts that Canada's overall poverty rate grew by 21.8% from 2021 to 2022, followed by an additional 13.3% increase from 2022 to 2023. These growth rates imply a predicted overall poverty rate of 9% in 2022 and 10.2% in 2023, compared to the official poverty rate of 7.4% in 2021. So these numbers are higher, and when you've got trends going in the wrong direction like that, you're essentially turning into a third world country. And this is what happens when you import a lot of the third world as well. You have no jobs for them. You have no mechanism to deal with all these people coming. I mean, I have nothing against the people who are trying to come for a better life, but the reality is there's no jobs for them. If they're ending up at food banks and on the street, that is just a ridiculous thing. And the government is obviously causing that. And I think that they should be freezing immigration at this point, because obviously it's having an impact on the economy, and the economy can't cope. And then Stephen Pumwazi of Better Dwelling put, Canada's poverty rate grew 4x the rate of its population last year, according to StatCan's latest estimate. Official numbers are not in yet, but it's clear even the highly optimized model to underreport poverty is breaking. So, you know, even more than the population grew. So it shows that a lot of that is domestic as well. And then what's even more concerning is the amount of children, with more than 1 million Canadian children currently living in poverty, despite Canada's progress in reducing child poverty between 2012 and 2021. The number of children living in monetary poverty has risen from 15.2% in 2020 to 17.8% in 2021. Single-parent families, families living in Indigenous communities, and families with racialized or disabled children are at higher risk of poverty, according to a UNICEF report. Rising inflation and interest rates are driving the cost of living crisis and the increase in poverty rates across all age groups. Not really true when you think about it, because what came first and caused the inflation? It wasn't interest rates going up, it was interest rates going down. And that's exactly what we're starting to get into right now. So it's unbelievable. But anyway, the discontinuation of the CERB program has further increased hardship among Canadian families. Again, I mean, if you don't understand the way this works, if people aren't paying their mortgage because it's being subsidized by the government, if the government is handing out stimulus checks, I mean, Alberta was one of the biggest, handing out loads of stimulus checks over the past couple of years. And the people eligible for those stimulus checks were very, very wide reaching. And the thing is, the Alberta government doesn't produce anything. So then all that new money is competing for goods and services. And what does that do, guys? It pushes the price of everything up. So I think we know that bringing back the CERB program is not really going to do anything. But it's very interesting to look at this sort of stuff, and very, very sad. Canada is in fact turning into a third world country. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. And if you're looking for a VPN to get around all the censorship in Canada, you know where to go. Go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. That's the VPN that I use. I will see you in the next one. Take care.